Okay, welcome everybody. This is our interviews and assessments for postgrad session for this semester. My name's Elizabeth Wilkinson. I'm one of the careers consultants at the University of Manchester Careers Service. And today I'm going to be ably assisted by my colleague, Ben. Ben, do you want to give a very brief introduction to yourself?
Hi everybody. Very similar story really. I am another one of the careers consultants from the Careers Service. Some of you may already know me, but if you're a new postgraduate, then hello, welcome to Manchester, and I hope you have a great session today.
So what I'm going to cover today is basically four things. Preparing for interviews, what's the stuff that you can do to get yourself organized and get yourself ready for going through interviews. I will cover something about tricky interview questions and how to answer those. We'll talk about how you can improve your interview performance. So obviously make the best of your interviews, which are going to be coming up. And then there's so many other things that it can do to you. And so I'll try and give you a quick run through of some of the kinds of things that they can do in addition to interviews and all the support that we've got available for you. Okay, so let's start out with the preparation. This is the bit nobody enjoys doing, but actually it's going to make it so much easier for you actually going through the assessment or interview process if you do your preparation. So first thing you can do is find out what the employers are looking for. So I used to be an employer, I used to be a graduate recruitment manager, an HR manager in industry and so on. And I've written so many adverts and recruited so many people. I can give you the inside story about what employers are looking for. Basically, they put what they're looking for in the advert. So it can help to predict all the questions. It will tell you hopefully something about the knowledge you need, something about the experience you need, and something about the specialist skills. But in addition, and this is often some of the really key selection points, it'll tell you about the personal skills that people are looking for, the strengths, the things which come naturally to you, and also what you care about, the values. And this is the things which are important to the employers, the way we do things around here. So here's an extract from a real example advert. So this was from a smaller consultancy. So we pride ourselves on taking a more involved and hands-on approach to our consulting advice to clients with a very friendly, collaborative company culture. Your voice will always be heard. And it tells you what they're looking for. Someone with entrepreneurial flair, it's got a startup feel, candidates who can get stuck in. Someone's got strong interpersonal skills, it's a client-facing role, an avid problem solver who takes initiative. I know that there's people out there thinking, yeah, that sounds like so much kind of HR jargon waffle. But there's lots and lots of clues in there, even with some of those kind of jargon type words, which are going to tell you what they're after and you can prepare for. So the ones which are often quite tricky to pick out and which often are populated in these kind of adverts are your personal skills and your strengths. So they tell you the sections in blue are the personal skills and strengths. And it might be specifically a skill, an avid problem solver. So obviously avid sounds like they really do care about that. So that's one of their top priorities. So you're going to want to have examples of where you've solved problems, where you've taken initiative, where you've got strong personal skills and where you've applied those. But also things like just the way that you do things. So getting stuck in, somebody who likes to be active, likes to actually not just sit back and think about things, but to get on and do things. So those are really important ones. And those are the things which you can be preparing for with your CVs, your applications, and certainly for your interview prep. The other ones which I think are really important and sometimes under-recognized how important they are those values. So the things that they pride themselves on. This is what we, as an employer, this is what we care about. This is what we think is important to us. It's that hands-on thing again that goes into the getting stuck in. So they're aligning themselves. You want a more involved, hands-on approach, friendly and collaborative. Again, that's echoed by the strong interpersonal skills. Your voice will always be heard. Okay. So there are things which, if you've got examples of where you also like that hands-on and involved approach, that's going to be speaking to their values. And so that will help them figure out, would you fit in around here? Would you actually enjoy working with us? Would we enjoy working with you? So that's kind of deconstructing the advert. once you know the skills, the strengths, the values, and obviously the knowledge, experience, and any specialist skills, how are you going to find out what your real strengths are and so on? So strengths is something which has become far more important in recent times. A lot of people talk about skills, and I can give you some examples of how you can break down those skills and demonstrate those skills. But strengths is something which is particularly pertinent at the moment. There are ways of trying to understand what your strengths are. These are the things which you just naturally enjoy doing, and you can probably name half a dozen of them off the top of your head. But if you want to understand them in terms of an employer's view of your strengths, then have a look at things like the strengths profile example I've got here. There's one of the key providers of employer strengths assessment processes has got a free starter profile that you can take part in. So you just register for it under www.strengthsprofile.com. and then you can do a shortened version of their profiles. You have to pay to do the longer version, but probably the shorter version will be perfectly adequate to get you started. So I would recommend having a look at some of those. There's also thinking about your other, not just your strengths, but also your skills. Now, you may know about what you think your main skills are, but I think it's actually often easier, instead of asking you that kind of abstract idea, what are your skills? What are your strengths? And you've got to kind of invent them out of the ether, is to go from concrete examples to those kind of abstract concepts. And this is where you need other people. So you kind of need to enlist your friends. That can be particularly helpful. So find a friend who's going to be helpful to you. Look at those strengths and skills that you needed for the jobs that you want. So have a look at those adverts, try to unpick what are the key strengths, and let your friends know what those strengths are. And then try to describe examples of some of the things that you've done, some of the challenges you've overcome, some of the achievements you've had, things that you might have been successes, or even just talking about work experience that you've had, or things that you've done during your postgraduate programs. And what your friend can do is use those strengths and skills lists that you've given them, employers are looking out for, and pick out examples of where you've been using those strengths and skills. So I think that's particularly helpful. It means that you don't have to sit there and just try to noodle about, what are my strengths? You're actually going from those examples, and you can then use those examples in your interviews. So once you've got some examples of what are your strengths, you've got some good examples to back that up, what else can you do in terms of preparation? Well, I think one of the most useful things you can do is try to think not in terms of scripts. I do lots and lots of practice interviews. I love doing practice interviews. And it's so obvious, even when somebody's been practiced, whether they're reading from a script. Far better to look at things like bullet points. So just think of one or two word bullet points rather than scripts. So what you could do is, I use mind maps a lot, and you don't have to use this format, but I think it can be a quite useful way, particularly if you think visually, to be able to get a lot of information on one page. So you might have, what are your achievements? Okay, and these can come from all parts of your life. So you might be part of a student society, and then you might have some examples which show organizational teamwork or innovation with some new ideas that you brought into the student society. You may be doing some public engagement with a museum, or you might have a research project, either as part of your master's degree or your PhD. And those could be good examples of, obviously, data analysis, but might also be communication, negotiation, if it's a group project for a master's program, and so on. And you might somewhere in your past have done some kind of industrial experience or a placement. And that might be able to give you commercial awareness or customer focus. So there are so many places that you can find these skills. And then what you would do is, for each of those particular skills, have just a couple of, again, just note form some ideas of the examples you've got, and remind yourself of some of the examples in quite some detail, so that you can talk about them and give an employer some detail about what you've done. Okay. If you can actually answer in bullet points, that's really impressive to an interviewer. And it makes their job so much more easy, because when you're writing notes, you're almost writing it down in bullet points. So that's a real skill if you can manage to get to that level. It also helps you kind of organize your thoughts. And if you can think, right, I'm going to talk about these 3 bullet points in this answer, and it will stop you rambling on, which is always a useful thing to be able to do. So let's move on from the preparation. Let's talk about the actual questions themselves. There are lots of questions you might get, but these are the 3 questions that I normally start out my practice interviews with. So tell me a bit about yourself. It sounds like such an easy question, and I'm sure that interviewers ask it because they think that will get you kind of warmed up, but it is such a tough one to go for. I think it's a really good idea to have something in preparation. So maybe starting out with what you're doing right now, and then maybe backtracking to how did you get to that point, and then maybe something which is talking about what you'd like to go on to in future, or some of the other maybe non-degree related activities you've been involved in, just something which gives them a different view of yourself. 1 or 2 minutes, probably no more. That's a really nice starting point. But the danger with this one is you either dry up after 30 seconds or you find yourself rambling for 5 minutes and the employer's getting a bit bored. So I would definitely suggest that you have a go at that one first. Then the 2 which most people hate having to answer, but I think are really important, and I've virtually always asked in some form during an interview: why are you interested in this role? And why are you interested in coming and working for us? Now, the reason employers ask that, I know this from being an employer, is you really do want somebody who's going to fit within the job that you're interviewing for. Because somebody who fits with that job, who really wants to do it, and knows a bit about the organization that they're going to be working with, and actually is in tune with them, it means that there is less chance of it being a bad fit. And if it's a bad fit, then that's when problems arise. So think about what it is that, not only what interests you in this role in terms of what you're going to get out of it, but very often what you can bring to it is a really smart way of answering that question. So yeah, you might be interested in going and working for an organization because they pay really well, they're in the right location, you won't have to move. Okay. That's not really going to cut it with the employer. It's more about, I've got these particular strengths or skills in this area, and I really want to apply it and start out my career in this aspect of marketing or whatever it is. And then give some ideas about maybe what you've done to explore that and how you've realized that that's really the area that you want to go into. Then why are you interested in working for us? It can be a tricky one to get across, but think back to those values. Have you found out what the values are for the organization you want to work for? And then can you find something in your own background which shows how you're aligned with those values? So it might be that I really care about a particular aspect of sustainability, which is why I'm really interested in working for this particular organization in this role, because it will allow me to contribute to that and so on. Okay. So that's going to be very personal. It's also an opportunity to demonstrate that you know about the organization. Okay. There's a couple of different interview styles, which I think is important to know about. So, different styles of questions. Competency questions have been around for a long time. And so they're tried and tested. They're still used pretty extensively, although they are being overtaken a little bit now. So, but I think it's something you really need to have. You need to know how to tackle these. And these are the give me an example type questions. So tell me about a time you faced a difficult challenge. Describe a time when you persuaded others to your way of thinking, or give an example of when you had to deal with conflict in a team. So these will normally be based around the kinds of skills that they need within the role for somebody who's going to be successful within a role. And they want you to think about a specific actual time, not just what you generally do, but a specific thing which you've done. And being able to talk in some detail about that to give them enough confidence that if you've done this in the past, if you used this skill or strength in the past, then that's pretty good ability to predict whether you'll be able to use that in the future. So that's why we still use competency questions, that if you've done it before, you'll be able to do it again, maybe in a different context. That's where this term transferable skills comes from. It's transferred from one context, which might be working on a university project, but it will transfer to working on a project with an employer. The other types of questioning, though, which has become much more common recently, are these strengths questions. If I'm honest, I think a lot of employers are getting a little bit bored about listening to the same competency answers. And so they've decided that actually it's more interesting for them, and it's more interesting for you, frankly, to be able to talk about the things that you're good at. So it's the things which come naturally to you. When are you at your best? What do you enjoy doing outside your study and work? What are you good at? What do you need to be better at? Because they may actually try to get you to talk about things which are the opposite of your strengths. So these are often very kind of short questions. You just get, it might even be something which is a one-word answer that you could answer. Do you enjoy starting or finishing a project? It could be, well, I enjoy starting them. However, the smart thing to do is not only to think about your natural instinctive reaction and give that answer, is to give a bit of enthusiasm behind it. Because what they're looking for is something which demonstrates it's not just a kind of, yes, here is the boring answer for you, is, yes, this is something I really do care about. I love doing this. But then backing it up with a small example to back up and to give evidence. So that kind of goes back to the competency-based questions. That almost like, give me a little micro example. With strengths interviewing, you often get lots and lots and lots of questions, quite short. They won't ask you to expand on them, but you will get extra credit if you do. So if you can back up your short answers with a nice, relatively short example of where you've used that strength, you will actually get marked more highly. Okay. Let me talk to you about the methodology, a useful methodology for answering, particularly the competency-based questions, but also those kind of strengths, the examples that you give with strengths-based questions. So this STAR formatting. So STAR stands for situation. That's where you describe the situation you were in. Task, what were you trying to achieve? What was the specific task that you worked on? The actions, and actions that you took, and that's very specific actions. And then an end result, the outcome. You can then take it off to the next level by giving them the reflection. So what did you learn? What insights did you gain? Now, to give you a little bit more information about this, I'll use a real example. Okay, so the situation, this is the short bit of your answer. As a volunteer at the local food bank one evening a week, that's the situation. You didn't have to tell them all about how you got the job and what you do and what it's called and all that background. Cut to the chase, get to the point quickly. What were you trying to achieve? I needed to ensure the food donations were processed and available for customers as soon as possible. That's it. That was your task. Then what you do is you spend most of your answer on the actions that you took. And so this is working a team of 3, identified shortages, prioritized unloading to meet the client's immediate needs, and on and on and on. So this is where the majority of your answers should come. You always kind of break it down into little micro actions and be able to explain to somebody the things that you personally did. These are tricky if you're talking about a teamwork question, because what you want to try to do is talk about the actions that you personally took to help the team achieve its needs, rather than talk about what we did all the time. Okay, so it's about what you did and then the impact on the team. Then your end result could be, as a result, our team met the target of processing 4 donations per shift. That was your outcome. That's where a lot of people will end their answer. But if you can add on that reflection at the end, it really does take it up to the next level. And this is where I think employers really give you extra credit. So what did you learn? What insights? I realize you can achieve a lot in the tight timescales if you organize effectively. Okay, and just realize you're using those kind of skills words coming in, so you're reinforcing the ability, showing that you've got those skills abilities. You know, if the team understands the role and you communicate with your team, then things change. So this shows that you can manage that kind of change and flexibility and variability. There is actually just a slight variation on this. So, I mean, you don't have to be exactly kind of routine and formulaic about it. But another formulation, a way of tackling this is one which I call R-star. It's basically doing it all in a slightly different order. So if somebody says, okay, what are your key skills or what are your key strengths? Okay, this was a real example I did. I sometimes find it easier to give you proper, from the heart, actual examples based on what I'm trying to achieve. So, real example, I like pushing boundaries. That's my strength or skill. Always wanted to just push it a little bit more, see what we can do a little bit different. For example, I recently opted, not I had to. Had to is all, it doesn't matter what context it is, it always makes it sound like you were forced into it. Bit boring. No, you actively want to engage with this. So recently I opted to create completely new materials for an interview skills course. So that was the end result. That's what I was trying to do. I was getting the completely new materials for an interview skills course. Then I get to the situation, okay? So I already had tried and tested, but old materials. And then I'll go into all the actions that I took. So I'm not going to write all those down, but that's when you break it down, what you actually did and how you achieved it. And then you end up with the reflection. So I think this new approach better reflects current and emerging career practice. So you can play around with that kind of the structure of your answer. And there are different ways of approaching it. So some might be appropriate for these little micro examples. Some might be appropriate for the more extensive answers that you might give. Okay. Other questions that you might get, which are sometimes tricky. What is your main weakness? Everybody hates that question. It's still used, I'm afraid. You have to at least have something ready for it so that you go into an interview confident. A lot of these questions, like they tell me a bit about yourself. As long as you feel confident that you could answer it if it comes up, then it's great. You may not have to deal with it, but I would always say feel confident going into the interview. One of the ways of tackling the weakness question is not I'm a bit too much of a perfectionist. I'm a bit too hardworking, conscientious. Most employers will just say, no, give me a real one. Okay. So try and think of something that maybe used to be a weakness, but you've worked on and you've fixed, because that gives you all sorts of additional things which are coming out there. It's somebody who's self-aware, somebody who can look at developing themselves, and somebody who's actually maybe got something which is now a bit of a strength, but it used to be an underlying weakness. You can sometimes sell that one. So think about things that you can practically do something about, which might be about improving your presentation skills or improving your time management. So then there's the will you be a good investment type questions. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Who knows? We would not have predicted 5 years ago that we'd be sitting on Zoom, okay, being vaccinated and so on. So yeah, we really can't predict the future. But it's still I kind of think people are still going to ask that. They want to feel for where do you see yourself going? I always think a smart way of answering that is not just the job that you want to go for, don't try to aim for the particular job, but try to think about what you might want to have delivered within the next 5 years. So, okay, within the next 5 years, I would hope that I would be able to take on significant project management responsibility, potentially managing my own team, and I'd certainly like to have significant budgetary responsibility. It would also be nice maybe to use my languages by doing some kind of joint project or doing some kind of coordination with your plant out in Germany. I haven't said which job I want to be in, where I want to be, might even be in a different organization. I'm not going to tell them that, but I've talked about the things I want to deliver. And that leaves a really positive impression. Okay, if you're talking about academia, what ideas do you have for further research? So they're wanting to know, particularly if you're going for a postdoc job, are you just in it for the postdoc or are you thinking longer term? Things like what are potential sources of funding? Are you an academic in the making? I had a conversation with a really good professor at the university some years back, and she was talking about early career success for postdocs in particular. She said, you want to know that people have got the skills and so on to do the job, but you also want to know that the best is yet to come. So it's that forward thinking which is really important. Then you might have things like, which other jobs have you applied for? And there's nothing kind of underhand about that. It's trying to think about, are you actually thinking in the same line? When I used to recruit in the electronics industry, I was more than happy if people came back with a series of my competitors. In fact, it was even better for the individual if they said, well, actually, I've got I'm at second interview with Siemens and with this other organization with IBM. I've got I've got an interview coming up, or I've just passed the assessment center. That would reassure me that you were you're interested in the same field as I was in, and that in particular, if other people were interested in you, then you must be pretty good. So I maybe need to get a move on to try and recruit you. So don't panic if they ask you which other jobs you apply for, but don't give them the scattergun, all sorts of different things. Try to keep it within the same kind of focus. When it comes down to your questions, again, you can do yourself some favors. I would certainly have some questions there. You don't have to ask them, but it's useful to have them as a backup. Think about future prospects in the organization. Okay. If I was able to work in this field, would there be an opportunity maybe to get involved in some projects with your division over there? Something like that. Try to get them thinking about you and where you could be useful to them in future. If you're talking to academics, ask about the research, thinking about where they see the gaps being in terms of future research or where the funding is going to be. You might want to talk about training and learning opportunities, but I think the general question about how you're going to train me up, essentially, that just is about what can you give me rather than, what would be the opportunity maybe to learn in this field? That's a better way of putting it. And if you're really struggling and they're still asking you, got any questions, try asking the interviewer what they think about the organisation. Now, the things to avoid are anything which is obviously on their website, anything which is really detailed, microscopic detail. Even if you're going for finance jobs, those kind of detailed questions generally mean the interviewer doesn't know the answer, and it's not really a good idea to embarrass your interviewer. Okay, so don't get too specific. And I know you really want to know about the salary and maybe some of the other kind of benefits, but it's really hard in the UK to ask about those kind of aspects of the job without the employer thinking, oh, I thought you were really interested in the job, not just what I'm going to pay you. So there's another good reason for not asking about salary at that early stage. And that's simply because they haven't offered you the job yet. Once they offer you the job, that's when you've got negotiating power. If you ask about salary early on, they may just tell you what the salary is, and you've got no chance then of coming back to try to negotiate a slightly higher salary. Okay, so practical reason for avoiding the what's the salary question. Okay, Ben, any questions we want to deal with now?
A regular question that comes up around asking questions, sponsorship. How is that an appropriate thing to ask? And maybe on a lot of people's minds, when you get to that bit at the end of the interview, they say, do you have any questions for us? Is this a good time to ask questions about sponsorship?
I assume you mean sponsorship for visas. Is that...
Indeed. Sorry,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that question always comes up. Again, it's a tricky one to know. If they're aware that you are needing a work visa, then you could ask that at the end. Obviously, you've got, as postgraduates, if you are graduating from July 21 onwards, then you've got 2 years using the graduate route visa for our masters and taught postgraduate students, and for PhDs you've got 3 years without the employer having to do anything. So I mean, what you could do is maybe suggest that, obviously tell them that, say, obviously I've got 3 years on my post-PhD visa, which I can work for you directly. What might be the opportunities maybe sometime later on to be able to convert that into a skilled route visa? That's something you could ask. Again, though, I might be tempted to wait until they offer you the job, because then they know that they really want you, and that's, again, it's negotiating. So What do you reckon, Ben?
Yeah, it can be a very tricky thing to raise, particularly as some interviewers won't necessarily be in a position to comment on it. Yeah. While you would hope that every interviewer you meet will have the full command of the facts, some may be new to it, some may not have a full grasp of the different options open to the company when it comes to visas. So yeah, it may be something to bring up once you get to that next stage of being invited to the next interview or being offered the job.
Absolutely. I mean, I think people are, our students, our graduates are not aware very often that the visa regulations have changed very recently for employers, and a lot of them are unaware of what's happened from July onwards. So they're still working in the old regime. So yes, it's an opportunity to be able to let them know that things have changed, but it depends on whether that's the right time to do it. So let's go on to getting yourself set up for actually improving your interview style. Obviously, we're now in the era of online interviews. Some employers are going to be doing some face-to-face interviews, and we are starting to hear more examples of that. But by and large, employers are still very much doing online recruitment at the moment. So I think we've all got pretty familiar with what you should and shouldn't do. So it's kind of usual, get rid of potential for noise. So kick the cats out of the room that I'm in when I'm doing a recorded webinar, things like that. Make sure that they're fed so they're not scratching at the door. Dress as if you're a professional in case you do have to stand up. Think about what's behind you. If as I am, you're in a room where if you turn your virtual background off, you've got a lampshade coming out of your head. It's a good idea to have a nice neutral virtual background. Make sure that you're all kind of teched up in terms of you're plugged in, your laptop's all plugged in, it's all charged. You're not going to have any pop-ups coming up. Turn off as many applications as you can, particularly if you're going to be doing video, and make sure that your face is lit if possible. So not having the kind of dark, sort of room behind you and everything in silhouette. A lot of that's for live interviews, but an awful lot of people are doing recorded interviews, and this can often happen at the early stages in the process. So this is where you're going to get short notice, 3-5 days notice. This is your opportunity to practice. So make sure you get the chance to practice. They will normally offer you a practice in whatever video platform they're using. So it's useful to get, even if you've done practice video interviews before, if there's a practice as part of the real interview you're going to have to do, I would suggest that you take that, because sometimes the controls and the quirks of different video platforms can be a bit different. Make sure your camera's working, make sure your microphones look working, again, all the lighting stuff. Try and talk to the person behind the camera. Okay, so you're actually trying to focus on as if you were in a real life, in the same room as them, essentially. It varies by interview platform and interview, but an average about 30 seconds to read a question, and then about a couple of minutes to answer that question. They will tell you how long you've got to read the question, how long you've got to answer it. While you're doing your reading or your preparation, you can make lots of notes. You shouldn't be being videoed in that preparation time. But you are being videoed in that 2 minutes. And unless there's sometimes a little button which allows you to say, right, I've finished my answer, move on, where it will essentially move you on to the next question, so you stop being videoed. If you wait for those 2 minutes and you run out of things to say after a minute, you're going to be sat there looking at the screen for a minute. And that's really uncomfortable. It's even worse if you don't realize that you're still being videoed and you start doing all sorts of other things. So just get some practice with this so you're familiar with the whole setup. If you're going to make notes, you can make notes beside your screen. I often think it's a useful idea to have kind of post-it notes around about your laptop, around about your screen. And that will hopefully keep you, give you the prompts that you need to be able to answer these questions satisfactorily. And you've got to try and smile and try and keep your energy going high. Otherwise, it can end up being very drab and dreary. Okay, so you need to get some energy.
Can I come in on that last point there, Elizabeth? I think that, yeah, every time I've watched a recorded video interview, everyone often terribly serious. It's that desperate desire to be professional on camera, it does drive a lot of the joy out of it sometimes. So yeah, please remember to smile. When I've seen sort of two equally good video interviews, it's usually been the one that's been more enthusiastic that's tended to, to tip the scale. So please remember to smile.
Yeah, remember those strengths. They are looking for enthusiasm, motivation. So that's another reason why it's really important to kind of demonstrate that enthusiasm. Okay, we've got some support for you. For those of you who haven't tried it yet, have a look at ShortlistMe. You've got you can register for a University of Manchester account, and what this allows you to do is to get experience with using the video interview platform. We've got some employer video interviews on there where the employers have given us some example questions. So they're set up for those employers. The employers don't actually get to see those video interviews, but they've shown them the kind of questions you might get asked. And we've got some others which we've set up ourselves. So please do take advantage of that. It's a really, really useful tool for you. Right, let's quickly scamper through some of the other things that can put you through. I'm not going to be able to go through each one of these in detail because there's so many things that you can do. There are lots of different types of tests, and these might come at an early stage within the recruitment process. So there's the kind of usual aptitude tests that we've been doing for a long time: verbal, numerical, logical. Situational judgment tests, really important these days. A lot of employers are actually moving down the route of situational judgment tests, almost to the exclusion of other types of tests, and sometimes before you even get the chance to think about doing an interview. There is really important to understand about what's seen as normal etiquette within the workplace in the country that you're going for. So particularly for international students, I know that some of those find those quite tricky if they're going for a UK interview and it's got situational judgment tests. I would strongly recommend that you either try to get some part-time work to understand how people interact with each other in the workplace in the UK, or even do some volunteer work. And that will give you something to be able to draw your experience on. Then there's personality tests, game-based assessment, virtual reality tests we've seen people doing, case study interviews if you want to go for consultancy, quite in depth. Then you've got the full-on assessment centres, whether that's online or in some cases going to be in person. And again, group exercises and presentations and inbox exercises can all be done online or in person. Now, the type of support that we've got two particular services to help you. One of them is Graduates First, and that's got extensive information and support and practice for you. And one of them is Profiling for Success. Profiling for Success is pretty good if you wanted to go for looking at the personality type of tests, understanding more about yourself, about your learning styles, and also maybe a little about how that matches in with career choices. I want to just talk through a couple of things which you get with Graduates First, though, because I think it's an under-recognised resource, and not everybody knows about it. So you can get your own account with Graduates First. You go in through the University of Manchester link rather than just the general link, and then if you register for them, then you can get free access to it. Here's just a couple of the examples of things that you get. They've got examples of these ability tests, and it's not just one test. If you look at those, there's 15 numerical reasoning tests that you can have a go at. What I like about Graduates First approach is not only do they make you do the test and give you the result, they'll give you some tips on how you can improve, whether you need to speed up, whether you need to become more accurate. So there are things which actually support you getting better in these tests. But there's a whole load of other things as well as the ability tests. So for instance, they've got lots of insights videos, dozens of short videos, all about different aspects of doing tests. And a lot of these have come from employers. There are, as you can see here, there's stuff about recruitment processes, personality tests, lots of other specialist tests. If you wanted to go into law, then they've got the Watson-Glaser, they've got CAP tests, all sorts of things. So I'd strongly recommend you having a go at some of those. Another aspect of Graduates First, which again, I don't think everybody knows about because it's not part of that kind of suite of assessments, is they've got a guide to over 100 employer assessment processes. So that's accessible even without the account. But I would really strongly suggest that you go and have a look at some of those, because if you're wanting to be recruited by one of those 114 last time I looked, organisations, you're going to get some insight into what they might put you through. and also how Graduates First can help you. So finally, just to talk about the kind of extra kind of support that we can give you. I would, again, strongly recommend that you have a look at Career Connect, where you booked this webinar. And if you look at the little icons when you first log in, there's the icon on the far right-hand side, the little pathways icon. And that's where you get access to some of our learning resources. It's where we try to pull together all the kind of, whether it's webinars, whether it's videos, whether it's things which are written, whether it's things which are interactive, putting it all into one pathway so that it'll guide you towards where we think is going to be the most useful resources for you. And we've got one specifically on assessment, tests and interviews. So that's one quick and easy way to, how do you find all this stuff? The links will be through there. We've got lots more support coming up as well. I'm going to be doing these online live Q&A sessions. So we've got one for PGTs, that's taught postgraduates, on the 26th of October next week from 12 to 1, and for research postgraduates on the 29th of October from 1 till 2. I know that the questions are often quite different for PhDs and other research postgraduates compared to taught postgraduates, so we separate those out. We've got lots of employer and interactive workshops going on this semester. Now, we will have some more coming on next semester, but the vast majority of employer-led workshops will be now. So if you want, even if you're not ready to be interviewed, maybe you're going on for another year, I would strongly, again, recommend that you have a look and see at the events which are going on now, because they won't be coming back again until this time next year. Okay. Talked about ShortlistMe with your practice video interviews. We've got lots of support through Graduates First. And the other thing which all the careers consultants do are the interview simulations. So if you've got a real interview coming up, try and give us as much notice as you can and try and book in with one of our interview sims. And that's when we can't tell you exactly what questions you're going to get. But my aim with an interview simulation is to try to understand what your concerns are, focus in on those, and let you go out of that half-an-hour session feeling confident that you can tackle those. So it's one of the most satisfying bits of the job, I think. Lots more information at the manchester.ac.uk/careers website, including a whole section on applications and interviews. So lots more support for you. Okay, then, that's my final slides, unless we've got any more questions which are going to come through. I've got a couple of slides I can show. Any other questions to go through?
I think we're okay. We've had a couple which have been able to field in the chat. I would just like to get your thoughts, please, on the practice of how you manage notes during interviews, either live in person or as a video interview.
Okay, that's an interesting one. As a recruiter, I always found it a little bit odd when people would pull out a notebook and start taking notes during the interview.
Oh, sorry, I meant referring to notes.
Oh, referring to notes. Okay. But sometimes you actually do have people who want to take notes during the interview, which kind of it does make you worried that they're going to start to develop a legal case for why they didn't get the job. Referring to notes. I think it's something that we can get away with when it's an online, because literally you can have notes tucked around either behind your screen, which is a handy thing to do, or around the edges of your screen. But if it's in person, it could be okay, but it would be a lot better if you can answer naturally. Yeah, I'd be less inclined to use notes if you can get away without it, which is why the online interviews are great, because it means you can have your notes just to remind yourself all round. Okay. Any other questions?
I think we're okay otherwise. Maybe let's, I think your final slides would be good ones to throw up for people, because I think it's probably on their minds.
Okay, yeah, Ben has got some extra information that I've put a couple of slides at the end in case the questions came up. So I'll show you these slides because I think it might be useful to you. Okay, my extra information. Okay. What salary do you expect? It's a tough question, isn't it? Okay. So I'm going to ask you a tough question. What do you reckon is the average UK graduate starting salary? Okay. From 20,200 all the way up to 50,000. Okay. Do you want to stick in the chat? I can't see, but Ben will be able to see. Which one of those do you think is the average UK graduate starting salary?
We're getting quite a few votes for 2,200, 24, Anybody gone beyond the 24? Somebody gone for 30,000. There we go.
Higher, lower.
Oh, no, sorry, we've got one for 45. I do beg your pardon. So,
okay, yeah, okay.
But no, we're definitely at the lower end of the scale.
Right, let me show you what we've got. Okay, so they're all the average UK graduate starting salary. It depends on the context. So the first one, this was from Woodagudda, as we call it. What do graduates do? And this is the latest version. So these are average real salaries for all the 2017 to 18 graduates. That's the most recent data we've got. We ask you about what are you doing, what's the job you're doing after you've graduated, 50 months after you graduate. And there's also some questions about salary, which not everybody answers, but for those, this was an average graduate starting salary. This is for one specific subject. They didn't actually tell us which subject it was, but that was an average for that discipline. But the average overall subjects was quite a bit more. So it was 24,200. So that was seen as average. And that was for people back in the last time we ran this survey, or the last time it was published. So that was people from 2017 and 18 graduating and 15 months after they graduated. Then you get different people who will answer that question. So the things like the Institute of Student Employers, and these tend to be slightly bigger employers. It's not all graduates. It's kind of significant, maybe the top 200, 250 employers. And each year they do a survey of what they're offering in terms of starting salaries. And their starting salaries, or their average, was 29,700, which sounds a lot better. But remember, those are the bigger organizations. Then you get into the mega big organizations. This is the Times Top 100 who are part of the High Flyers survey. Now, the positive part is that high flyers salaries averages are always higher, okay, because it's the biggest corporate names and some of the public sector, but the big names. The downside is that salary, average salary, hasn't changed for 5 years. So I'm afraid you can't assume that these salaries will be going up next year. It's absolutely been flat. But it does go up. So if you were going for strategy consulting, the high flyers average was 45 grand. Very nice. Legal, okay, 46 grand. What do you reckon was the 50 grand? You all know. Yeah, sure. It's investment banking, obviously. Okay. So that gives you a feel for it. Very much depends on the sector. It very much depends on the type of job you're going to be doing. So obviously non-graduate jobs are going to be significantly different, or experienced jobs are going to be significantly different. Yeah, and it also depends on the size of the employer. Now, I used to be an HR manager in industry, and one of my specialisms was looking at salary surveys. And there was a well-known kind of feature that the larger employers would generally be working at higher salary bands. So yeah, so bear that one in mind. Okay. Any comments on that, Ben, or anything else any comments which are coming through the chat on that?
No, that's okay. We're just there's some other questions coming around fares, which I'm just looking at now. But yeah, otherwise I think we're good. Okay, right. Well, thanks ever so much for everybody for coming along today. I've got the online Q&A, so if you have any specific Q&As that you want to get raised, very much more informal. It's not recorded, so you won't be able to watch back. It's come along, just ask the questions, and I'll be there maybe with one of my colleagues to be able to answer all your tricky, difficult questions on interviews and assessment. Okay. These slides, or rather the video of this, will hopefully be online in the next couple of days, as soon as we can get it downloaded and edited. And so just have a look either on our YouTube page or on the Postgraduate Careers Talks pages on our Career Service website. So I'll just stop the recording now.